The first time David noticed his mother standing at the kitchen window after midnight, he was 7 years old, awake with a fever, and the house felt like it was holding its breath. She stood perfectly still in her pale nightgown, her hand pressed against the glass, her breath making small circles of fog that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. When he asked what she was looking at, she turned with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Just checking the night, sweetheart. Making sure everything's where it should be." He didn't understand what that meant, but something in her voice told him not to ask again. That was 15 years ago, and his mother still stood at that window every night. And David had learned that some questions don't have answers you want to hear. And some vigils never end, no matter how much time passes or how far you run. David came back to Ashford on a Tuesday in November, the kind of gray afternoon where the light never seems to fully commit to day or night, just hangs in limbo between the two. The bus dropped him at the edge of town, where the gas station still had the same broken sign he remembered from childhood, the H in Ashford flickering like a dying heartbeat. He walked the 3 miles to the house because he wasn't ready yet. Wasn't ready to see it all at once. Needed the gradual approach like a person needs to ease into cold water rather than dive straight in. The call had come from Mrs. Peterson next door, her voice apologetic and worried. "Your mother's not well, David. She won't see a doctor, won't let anyone help. She just stands at that window all night, every night. And during the day she barely moves. I bring her food, but I don't think she's eating. Someone needs to come home." Home. As if he'd ever really left. As if the 9 years and 3 states between him and this place had been anything more than an elaborate form of pretending. You could leave Ashford, but Ashford didn't leave you. It lived in your bones, in the particular quality of silence you could never quite escape, in the way you still woke up sometimes at 12:01 a.m. for no reason you could name. The house looked smaller than he remembered, the white paint gone gray with age, the porch sagging on one side like an old man favoring a bad hip. His mother's garden had gone to seed, weeds claiming the space where roses used to bloom. The maple tree his father had planted the year David was born loomed over everything, its branches bare and black against the colorless sky. He knocked, even though he had a key. Old habits, old courtesies, the muscle memory of a childhood spent learning to be careful, to be quiet, to not disturb whatever fragile peace his mother maintained through her nightly vigils. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. "Mom, it's David. I'm coming in." The door was unlocked. It always was. His mother had this idea that locked doors kept things in as much as they kept things out, and she needed to be able to leave quickly if necessary. If what became necessary, she'd never said. Inside, the house smelled of dust and stale air and something else, something organic and faintly sweet that made David's stomach turn. The furniture was exactly where it had always been, the same couch with the worn armrest where his father used to sit reading the paper, the same rug with a coffee stain from David's 10th birthday party, the same family photographs on the mantle showing them all young and smiling, frozen in a happiness that felt archaeological now, something excavated from a world that no longer existed. "Mom?" A sound from upstairs. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crossing the floor above his head. Then silence. David climbed the stairs, his hand trailing along the banister, noticing the dust, the cobwebs in the corners, the overall sense of neglect and entropy. The bathroom door stood open, revealing mildew creeping up the shower curtain. His old bedroom door was closed, and he didn't have the heart to open it, to see what time had done to the space where he'd grown from boy to teenager to the young man who'd left and never quite come back. His parents' bedroom door was ajar. He pushed it open carefully. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her nightgown, though it was 3 in the afternoon, her gray hair hanging loose around her face. She'd gotten thinner, her shoulders sharp through the fabric, her hands like bird bones folded in her lap. When she looked up at him, her eyes took a moment to focus, as if she was returning from somewhere very far away. David, his name in her mouth sounded like a question, like she wasn't quite sure if he was real or just another shape the darkness took when she was tired enough. You came home. Mrs. Peterson called. She said you weren't doing well. Margaret worries too much. I'm fine. You don't look fine, Mom. You look... He stopped, couldn't finish the sentence. She looked haunted. She looked like someone who'd forgotten how to be fully present in the world, who existed half in this room and half somewhere else entirely. Tired, she finished for him. I'm tired. But that's nothing new. She attempted a smile. How long are you staying? As long as you need me to. Something flickered in her expression. Relief, maybe, or fear. You shouldn't have come. You have your life now, your job, your apartment in Chicago. You don't need to be here. I want to be here. No one wants to be here, David. They just end up here. There's a difference. She stood, moving with the careful precision of the very old or very fragile. I should make you dinner. You must be hungry from the trip. It's 3 p.m., Mom, and you should rest. Let me make dinner. I can't rest. Not yet. Not until... She stopped, pressed her lips together as if physically holding back words. Not yet. She moved past him into the hallway, and David followed her downstairs, watching the way she held the railing, the way she paused on the landing as if gathering strength for the next section. In the kitchen, she started pulling things from the refrigerator, items that looked days past their prime, leftovers in containers that had grown fuzzy with mold. Mom, when did you last go shopping? I don't remember. Tuesday? Or was that last week? She stared at a container of something that might once have been soup. Time gets strange when you don't sleep much. How much are you sleeping? Enough, Mom. A few hours. Before midnight. That's enough. It's not enough. No one can function on a few hours of sleep a night. She set down the container and looked at him with an expression so fierce and sudden it made him step back. I function fine. I do what I need to do. I keep watch. That's what matters. Keep watch for what? The question hung between them. David had asked it before years ago, 100 times, in 100 different ways, and never once gotten an answer that made sense. Just vague explanations about being careful, about paying attention, about making sure the night stayed outside where it belonged. His mother turned away. You wouldn't understand. Then help me understand. Tell me why you stand at that window every night. Tell me what you're looking for. Tell me what happened that makes you so afraid of sleeping after midnight. I'm not afraid. Then what are you? She was quiet for a long time, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft, he almost missed it. I'm keeping a promise. Before he could ask what that meant, she straightened and changed the subject, asking about his job, his apartment, the life he'd built in Chicago. He answered automatically while his mind spun around that one word. Promise. What promise? Made to whom? And why did keeping it require this endless vigilance, this refusal to sleep, this slow erosion of her health and sanity? They ate dinner, sandwiches because the rest of the food was inedible, in near silence. His mother picked at hers, took small bites and smaller sips of water, her attention constantly drifting to the kitchen window, even though it was still light out, even though whatever she watched for only came after midnight. I'm going to stay for a while, David said. Take some time off work. Help you get things sorted out here. There's nothing to sort out. Mom, the house is falling apart. You're falling apart. Someone needs to help. I don't need help. I just need... She trailed off, looking at the window. I just need to keep watching. That night, David lay awake in his old bedroom, staring at the ceiling where glow-in-the-dark stars still clung from his childhood. Their glow long faded. The house settled around him with familiar creaks and sighs. Down the hall, he could hear his mother moving, getting up, going downstairs. At 12:01 a.m. exactly, he got up and followed. She stood at the kitchen window in her usual spot, her hand pressed against the glass, her breath fogging and clearing. The backyard was dark beyond, just shapes and shadows. The maple tree a black silhouette against the slightly lighter sky. "Can't sleep?" she asked without turning around. "No. You never could after midnight. Even as a baby, you'd wake up right at 12 and cry until dawn. The doctor said it was colic, but I knew better. Some people are just sensitive to the hour. To the change." "What change?" "The world shifts at midnight. Haven't you noticed? The way the air feels different? The way sounds carry differently? It's the threshold hour, when things can slip through if you're not careful." David moved to stand beside her. "What things?" "Memories. Regrets. The past trying to push its way into the present." She was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, and sometimes, if you're very unlucky, things that should stay buried." "Mom, you're not making sense." "I know." She sounded tired, infinitely tired. "I stopped making sense 22 years ago, the night your brother died." The words hit David like cold water. "What brother?" His mother finally turned to look at him, and her face was wet with tears. "Your twin, Thomas. He died when you were both 3 years old. We never told you. We thought it would be easier if you didn't remember, if we just moved forward like he'd never existed." David felt the floor tilt under his feet. I don't understand. I had a brother, a twin, identical. You were inseparable. Where one of you went, the other followed. You had your own language, the way twins do. You finished each other's sentences. You knew when the other was hurt or scared. And then one night, her voice cracked. One night I fell asleep. I was so tired, David. You two never slept at the same time. One of you was always up, always needing something. And I was so exhausted, I couldn't see straight. Your father was working double shifts. I was alone with you both. And I fell asleep. What happened? I woke up at 12:30. Something felt wrong. I went to check on you both and... She pressed her hand harder against the glass. Thomas was gone. Just gone. His bed was empty. The window was open. And he was gone. We searched everywhere. The police came, neighbors helped. We looked for days, weeks, but we never found him. Not a trace, not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, nothing. It was like he'd simply ceased to exist. David's mind reeled. But how is that possible? Someone must have taken him. Someone must have seen something, heard something. No one did. No one saw anything unusual that night. No cars, no strangers, nothing. He just vanished. She turned back to the window. And I knew it was my fault. I'd fallen asleep. I'd stopped watching. And the night took him. Mom, that doesn't make sense. The night didn't take him. Someone human took him. A person, a kidnapper. You think I haven't told myself that for 22 years? You think I haven't tried every rational explanation? But David, I remember waking up that night. I remember the feeling like something was in the house with us. Something that didn't belong. I remember going to your room and seeing the window open and feeling this presence, like the darkness itself had reached in and taken him. That's not possible. I know it's not possible. But I also know what I felt. And I know that I made a promise that night. To you, to Thomas, to whatever was listening, that I would never sleep again after midnight. That I would keep watch. That I wouldn't let anything else be taken. She met his eyes, and nothing has been. Not in 22 years, because I kept my promise. David didn't know what to say. This explains so much. The nightly vigils, the obsessive watching, the way his mother had always seemed haunted by something she couldn't name. But it also raised terrible questions. Why hadn't they told him? Why had they erased his brother from his life, from his memory? And why did he not remember any of it? Not even the smallest fragment. I don't remember him, David said quietly. I don't remember having a brother. Shouldn't I remember something? You were 3, and the trauma. The psychologist said trauma can erase memories, especially in young children. We thought it was a mercy that you didn't remember. We thought we were protecting you, she laughed bitterly. We were so stupid, thinking we could just pretend it never happened, thinking we could move on. Did Dad know about your promise? About you staying awake? He knew. He tried to talk me out of it at first. Said I needed rest, needed to heal, that staying awake wouldn't bring Thomas back. But eventually, he stopped arguing. I think he was afraid too. Afraid that if I slept, if I stopped watching, something else would happen. Something worse. She wiped her eyes. He died still believing I was doing the right thing. Or at least, he never told me otherwise. David thought about his father, dead 5 years now from a heart attack, gone too young and too suddenly. He'd always been a quiet man, serious, carrying some weight David had never understood. Now he did. The weight of a lost child. The weight of a wife's unbreakable promise. The weight of pretending their small family of 3 had always been complete. I want to see pictures, David said, of Thomas, of us together. His mother nodded slowly. Upstairs, in the attic, I kept everything. I couldn't throw it away, even when we were pretending he never existed. I couldn't erase him completely. They went upstairs together, pulled down the attic ladder, climbed into the dusty space where heat and memory collected. In the back corner, covered with an old blanket, sat 3 boxes. His mother opened them carefully, reverently, pulling out photographs, baby clothes, toys. David stared at the pictures and felt reality shift around him. There he was, 3 years old, standing next to an identical copy of himself. 2 little boys with the same dark hair, same round faces, same gap-toothed smiles. In some photos, they wore matching outfits. In others, they were naked in a bathtub, covered in soap bubbles, laughing. In every single one, they were touching, holding hands, arms around each other, faces pressed together. "We look exactly the same," David whispered. "You were identical. The only way we could tell you apart was a birthmark on Thomas's left shoulder. Otherwise, you were mirror images." David kept looking through the photos, and with each one, something stirred in the depths of his mind. Not quite memory, but the echo of memory, the shape of something lost, a feeling of companionship, of never being alone, of always having someone who understood without words needed, and underneath that, older and deeper, a feeling of something missing, a hole in his life he'd always sensed but never been able to name. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, and his voice was thick with tears he didn't understand, grief for a brother he couldn't remember. "Why did you let me grow up thinking I'd always been alone?" "Because we were cowards. Because we thought it would hurt less if you didn't know. Because," she stopped, pressed her hand to her mouth, "because every time I looked at you, I saw him. And I couldn't bear to tell you that you'd had someone who loved you more than anything. Someone who would have protected you. Someone who was taken because I was too tired to keep watch." They sat in the attic surrounded by the evidence of a lost life. A lost boy, a lost brother, and cried together. For Thomas, for the family they'd been, for all the years of silence and secrets and half-truths that had hollowed them out from the inside. Eventually, they went back downstairs. His mother returned to her post at the window. David sat at the kitchen table, his mind churning with questions he didn't know how to ask, emotions he didn't know how to process. "What do you see?" he finally asked. "When you look out there, what are you watching for?" "I don't know anymore. At first I thought I'd see him, Thomas, walking out of the woods, coming home, or I'd see whoever took him, returning for you. But as the years passed, I realized I was just watching for change, for anything different, for any sign that the night was paying attention again. She rested her forehead against the glass. It's become a habit now, a compulsion. I don't think I could sleep after midnight, even if I tried. My body won't allow it. It's like I'm hardwired to keep watch. But you're killing yourself, Mom. This isn't sustainable. You can't go on like this. What else is there? If I stop, if I sleep, what then? Do I let go of the only thing I've done for him in 22 years? Do I break my promise? Maybe it's time to. She shook her head. You don't understand. The promise isn't just about keeping watch. It's about penance, about punishing myself for what happened. I fell asleep and my son was taken. I deserve this. I deserve the exhaustion and the isolation and the slow crumbling of my mind. It's the least I owe him. Thomas wouldn't want this. If he could see you now, he wouldn't want you torturing yourself. You can't know that. You didn't know him. Neither do you, really. Not anymore. He was 3 years old. He didn't have the capacity to want anything except love and safety. And he had that, Mom, from you. Whatever happened, whatever took him, it wasn't your fault for being human enough to need sleep. But he could see his words weren't reaching her. The guilt had rooted too deep, had become part of her identity. She was no longer just a woman who lost a child. She was a woman defined by that loss, shaped by it, hollowed out and rebuilt around the empty space where Thomas should have been. David stayed awake with her that night, and the next, and the next. He started to see what she saw, the particular quality of darkness after midnight, the way shadows seemed to move with purpose, the way the silence felt weighted and watchful. He started to understand, too, the seductive nature of vigil keeping, the way it gave structure and meaning to grief, the way it transformed helplessness into action, however futile. On the fourth night, around 2 a.m., David thought he saw something in the backyard, a shape, small and child-sized, moving near the maple tree. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. Mom, do you see that? She was beside him instantly, her hand pressed against the glass. Where? By the tree. There's something. Someone. But as he said it, the shape dissolved into shadow and he couldn't be sure if it had ever really been there at all. His eyes were tired, playing tricks. That's all it was. Except his mother had gone rigid beside him. I saw it, she whispered. I saw it too. They watched the backyard for another hour, but nothing else appeared. Eventually, his mother sat down at the kitchen table, her hands shaking. He comes sometimes, she said, quietly. Or I think he does. Little glimpses. A shape that looks like him. A shadow, the right size. My therapist, back when I was still seeing one, said it was pareidolia. My brain creating patterns, seeing what I wanted to see. But I don't know. I don't know what's real anymore. Have you ever tried to go out there? When you see him? Once, years ago. The first time it happened. I ran outside in my nightgown, barefoot, calling his name. But there was nothing. Just the yard, the tree, the darkness. And when I came back inside, I felt like I'd made a terrible mistake. Like I'd broken some unspoken rule. Like the watching was what kept things balanced. And going outside had disrupted it. She looked at David. I never did it again. Over the following days, David tried to convince his mother to see a doctor, to get help, to at least try medication that might help her sleep. She refused everything. He cleaned the house, bought groceries, tried to bring some order to the slow decay. He called Mrs. Peterson to thank her for alerting him. Listened to her express relief that someone was finally helping his mother. She's been like this for years, Mrs. Peterson said. Ever since your father died, she's gotten worse. Before that, he'd sometimes convince her to rest during the day, to take care of herself. But after he was gone, she just gave up on everything except the watching. David asked carefully, Did you know about Thomas? About my brother? There was a long pause. I knew there were two of you, yes. I lived next door when it happened. I remember the police, the search parties. It was terrible. The whole town looked for weeks. We never found any trace of him. Another pause. Your parents never recovered. How could they? But your mother, she took it the hardest. She blamed herself. Always said she should have been watching, should have known, should have stopped it somehow. Did you see anything that night? Hear anything? Nothing. I was home, awake even. I had a newborn of my own who kept terrible hours. I didn't hear anything unusual. No cars, no screams, no doors. Just a normal night until suddenly it wasn't. David thanked her and hung up, feeling more confused than before. If multiple people had been awake in the neighborhood that night and no one had seen or heard anything, how had someone taken Thomas? How had they gotten into the house, taken a child, and vanished without leaving any evidence? Unless his mother was right. Unless it hadn't been someone. Unless it had been something. He immediately dismissed the thought. That was exhaustion talking. His own sleep deprivation making him susceptible to irrational ideas. There was a rational explanation. There had to be. A stranger who'd been watching the house waiting for an opportunity. A silent approach, a quick exit. It was horrifying but explicable. Except he kept thinking about that shape in the backyard. The way it had moved. The way it had seemed to flicker in and out of existence like a bad signal. The way his mother had seen it too, which meant it wasn't just his tired mind playing tricks. On the seventh night, David dreamed of his brother for the first time. They were 3 years old, playing in the backyard under the maple tree. Thomas was laughing, pushing a toy truck through the grass. David, his dream self, sat beside him, content just to be near, to exist in the same space. Then the sky darkened suddenly, unnaturally, and Thomas looked up with fear on his small face. "It's coming," he said, in a voice too old for his body. "You have to remember, David. You have to help her stop." "Stop what?" "Watching. She has to stop watching. That's what keeps me here. That's what won't let me go." David woke with a gasp, his heart racing, sweat cooling on his skin. The clock read 3:33 a.m. Downstairs, he could hear his mother moving around, probably making tea, maintaining her vigil. He got up and went to the kitchen. She stood at the window as always, but tonight she looked worse. Her skin gray, her eyes sunken, her hands trembling as she held her mug. "Mom, you need to rest. You're going to collapse." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're barely standing. Please just lie down for a few hours. I'll watch. I'll keep the vigil. You don't have to do this alone anymore." She turned to him, and her expression was desperate, pleading. "You don't understand. If I stop, if I sleep, I'm letting him go. I'm admitting he's really gone. And I can't. I can't do that. He is gone, Mom. He's been gone for 22 years. The watching won't bring him back. But it keeps him close," she whispered. "Sometimes I feel him, David. When I'm standing here, when I'm tired enough that the world gets thin, I feel him near me, like he's just on the other side of the glass. Like if I watch long enough, hard enough, I'll finally see him clearly." David felt a chill run down his spine. "What if you're right?" She blinked. "What? What if he is close? What if he's been trying to reach you all these years? But what if the watching, the promise, is what's keeping him trapped? What if he needs you to let go so he can move on?" His mother stared at him. "That's not possible." "How do you know? How do you know what's possible when it comes to this? You said yourself the night took him. What if it did? And what if your vigil is part of what's keeping him with the night instead of letting him find peace? You're suggesting I'm trapping him? That I'm hurting him? I'm suggesting that maybe the promise you made out of love and grief and guilt. Maybe it's become a cage, for both of you." His mother's face crumpled. She set down her mug and covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to let go." He's all I have left of him. You have memories. You have the love you shared with him. You have me, and I was part of him too. We're twins. He's in my DNA, Mom. He's in my cells. He's not gone completely as long as I'm here. David took her hands gently. But you have to let him rest. You have to forgive yourself. You have to sleep. She looked at him with eyes full of terror and hope. What if something happens? What if I sleep and something else is taken? Then we'll deal with it together. But Mom, nothing is going to happen. The only thing being taken right now is your life, bit by bit, night by night. And I can't watch that anymore. I won't. They stood in the kitchen as the clock ticked toward 4 a.m., toward dawn, toward the end of another night. Finally, his mother nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll try. But you have to stay with me. I can't do it alone." They went upstairs together. His mother lay down in her bed, still in her nightgown, her body rigid with fear. David sat beside her, holding her hand. "Tell me about him," David said softly. "About Thomas. About us. I want to know." And she did. She told him about their birth, how he'd come first and Thomas had followed 5 minutes later, how they'd been inseparable from the start, crying when separated, calming when reunited, how they'd learned to walk holding hands, taking steps together like they were one person split into two bodies, how they'd invented their own language, nonsense words that only they understood, but that seemed to communicate perfectly, how Thomas had been the braver one, always exploring, always leading, while David had been more cautious, more thoughtful, content to follow. "You balanced each other," his mother said, her voice growing softer, slower. "Where one was weak, the other was strong. It was beautiful to watch, like watching a miracle every day." She talked until her words slurred, until her grip on his hand loosened, until her breathing deepened and slowed. And finally, at 4:47 a.m., she fell asleep. David sat with her for another hour, watching her sleep, marveling at how peaceful she looked, how young. Without the burden of wakefulness, without the weight of her vigil, she looked almost like she might have looked 22 years ago, before tragedy had rewritten her life. Then, as dawn began to gray the windows, David heard it. A sound from downstairs, soft, like small feet on wooden floors. His heart hammering, he got up carefully, trying not to wake his mother. He moved to the hallway, listened. The sound came again. Footsteps. Small footsteps. Moving through the kitchen. David went downstairs slowly, his breath caught in his throat. The kitchen was empty, but the back door stood open, letting in the cold November air. He hadn't opened it. His mother certainly hadn't. It had been locked when they went upstairs. He stepped outside onto the porch. The backyard was silver with pre-dawn light, the grass wet with dew, the maple tree dark against the brightening sky. And standing beneath the tree, small and translucent and impossible, stood a boy. David couldn't breathe. The boy looked like he'd looked in the photographs. 3 years old, dark hair, round face. He wore pajamas decorated with trucks, and he was smiling. "Thomas," David whispered. The boy tilted his head, studying David with those familiar eyes, David's own eyes, mirror images. Then he nodded once. "Are you real?" Another nod, but slower, uncertain, as if the boy himself wasn't quite sure. Are you trapped? Is that why you're still here?" The boy's smile faded. He looked back toward the kitchen window, where for 22 years their mother had stood keeping watch. Then he looked at David again and shook his head. He pointed at David, then at himself, then made a gesture like breaking something apart with his hands. "I don't understand," the boy tried again. He pointed at David, touched his own chest, then spread his hands wide and brought them together, overlapping. Then he pointed at the kitchen window and shook his head firmly. David felt understanding dawn slowly, terribly. "You're not trapped by the watching. You're staying because of me. Because we're twins, because I'm still here, and you can't fully leave while I'm alive." The boy smiled again, and this time there was relief in it. He nodded. "But you want Mom to stop watching, to stop keeping vigil?" Another nod. "Because it hurts her, and watching her hurt hurts you." The boy's face crumpled. Even translucent and impossible, David could see the tears. His brother, this ghost, this memory, this fragment of what might have been, was crying. Not for himself, but for their mother, trapped in her own prison of grief and guilt. David felt his own tears fall. She's sleeping now. For the first time in 22 years, she's sleeping after midnight. I convinced her to let go, to stop the vigil. Is that what you wanted?" The boy nodded vigorously. He took a step backward, toward the woods beyond the yard. And as he did, he became more transparent, harder to see. "Wait," David said. "Don't go yet. I have so many questions. I want to know what happened. I want to know where you've been. I want to—" But Thomas was shaking his head. He pointed at the brightening sky, at the sun just beginning to rise. Then he touched his lips and blew a kiss, the gesture so childlike and sweet that David's heart broke. And then, as the first ray of sunlight touched the maple tree, Thomas disappeared like mist burning off water. David stood in the backyard for a long time, shaking, crying, trying to process what he'd just seen. Part of him wanted to dismiss it as hallucination, sleep deprivation, his mind creating what he wanted to see. But he knew better. He'd felt something shift when Thomas had disappeared, some fundamental change in the air, in the weight of the world. His brother had been there, had been trapped between life and death for 22 years, and now he'd finally moved on, because their mother had finally let go, had finally slept. David went back inside, locked the door, went upstairs. His mother was still sleeping, deeply and peacefully. He lay down on the floor beside her bed and fell asleep himself, exhausted and grief-stricken and strangely, impossibly at peace. When he woke, it was early afternoon. His mother was sitting up in bed, looking confused and frightened. "How long did I sleep?" "About 8 hours." "8!" She looked panicked. 8 hours? I haven't slept 8 hours I can't even remember. Did something happen? Is Everything's fine, Mom. Everything's more than fine. But the vigil. I broke my promise. I stopped watching. "What if—" "I saw him," David said quietly. "Last night, after you fell asleep, I saw Thomas." His mother went very still. "What?" David told her everything. The footsteps, the open door, the boy under the tree, the message he'd communicated. His mother listened with tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her mouth. "He was here? All this time?" "I think he was caught. Between staying and going. Because of me. Because twins share something, some connection. But mostly because of you. Because watching for him kept him tethered. He couldn't leave while you were still looking. But I was looking for him. I wanted to see him. You wanted to keep him close, and you did. For 22 years, you kept him close. But Mom, he didn't want to be kept. He wanted to rest. He wanted you to rest. And now," David took her hands, "now he can, because you let him go." She sobbed then, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. David held her while she cried, while 22 years of grief finally found its release. She cried for her lost son, for the years she'd spent trapped in her vigil, for the life she'd given up in service of a promise that had helped no one. But underneath the grief, David could feel something else, relief. His mother was finally, truly letting Thomas go. And in doing so, she was freeing herself. Over the following weeks, his mother started to heal. She slept through the night for the first time in decades. She started eating again, putting on weight, color returning to her face. She saw a therapist who specialized in grief and trauma. She joined a support group for parents who'd lost children. She started slowly and painfully to build a life that wasn't defined entirely by loss. David stayed for a month, then returned to Chicago. But he visited often, and they talked on the phone every Sunday. His mother sold the house eventually. Too many memories, she said. Too many years spent staring out that kitchen window. She moved to a small apartment in town, got a job at the library, made friends, and she slept. Every night, all night, she slept. David asked her once if she still felt Thomas's presence, if she ever sensed him nearby. She thought about it for a long time before answering. "No," she finally said. "He's gone. Really gone. And that's okay. That's how it should be. He's at peace wherever he is. And that means I can be at peace too." She smiled, and it was real, reaching her eyes in a way David hadn't seen in years. "I kept my promise in the end, just not the one I thought I was making. I kept watch until he was ready to go. And then I let him." David thought about his brother often. The brother he couldn't remember, but who'd been part of him nonetheless. He wondered sometimes what their life would have been like if Thomas had never been taken, if they'd grown up together, stayed twins and best friends and two halves of a whole. But mostly, he felt grateful. Grateful for the brief years they'd had together, even if he couldn't remember them. Grateful that Thomas had finally found peace, and grateful that his mother had too. And on certain nights, usually after midnight when the world felt thin and strange, David would stand at his apartment window and look out at the Chicago skyline and think he felt something. Not a presence exactly, but a feeling of companionship, of not being quite alone. And he'd smile and whisper, "Good night, Thomas. Rest well." And the feeling would fade, like mist in sunlight, leaving only peace behind. The old house on Maple Street has new owners now, a young family with twin daughters who play under the tree in the backyard and never think to wonder about the shadows that move at midnight. And the mother sleeps soundly through the night while her children dream. And if sometimes in the deep hours, a small figure stands beneath the tree, looking up at the house with love and longing. It's only for a moment before the dawn comes and burns away everything except memory and mercy and the gentle relief of finally, after so many years of watching, letting go.